What is going on, Bardown Breakdown? And tonight we are joined by our buddy Chris Poulsen from Tokyo Rose, New Jersey pop punk legends. Super excited to have Chris on tonight. Chris, what's going on?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Excited to talk to you.
So pumped. It was just so great because this whole week I got to just blast Tokyo Rose as I was painting my daughter's bedroom. You know, she's almost a year old now, and I'm like, you know what? I think I need to get the nursery situated, like, because it's now time to, like, actually put the crib in her own room and all of that. So I was painting all week, and I was just blasting Tokyo Rose, and it just put me in a real good place. So super excited to chat tonight.
Happy to help, man.
So I guess let's start a little current before we take it really back. I see that you're rocking a Catch-22 shirt. You guys recently had a show with them and Keep Flying. Was that your first show back, or did you have a few before that?
We had a few before that. So, a few like headliner shows, I guess you could say, like reunion shows. And then after that, it was sort of like during the time that we were about to play those, we were offered that Catch show. Because originally there was no plan to play any more shows other than just the ones, that we were the headliner ones. But we had such a good time doing it. We were like, oh, why not? And it's in New Jersey and it's with all our friends' bands. So we were like, oh, sure, of course.
So walk me through, I guess, those initial conversations of you like wanting to do those reunion shows. What sparked it?
That was like totally random. It was just this dude that, have you ever heard of the thing called Emo Night Karaoke?
Yeah, John Damiano.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know John?
Yeah, Jolly and the boys, Chris,
Yeah,
all
Justin's
of them.
band has played a few, or ex-band has played a few of them.
Yeah.
Cool. So John was a friend of ours from back in the day. And I've just kept in touch with him here and there online, Facebook, and he would randomly hit me up like, you guys should get together, you guys should play a show, I'll play the drums for you, all this stuff. And I was just kind of like, like I was thinking like, because he would be like, well, it'd be cool, people will come. And I was like, nah, I don't think so. I don't think anybody really cares, honestly. But he convinced me. And one of the things that he did was he found like, I guess there's some like message group, a bunch of them actually. And one time he had screenshot a little post that someone had made. It was this girl that she was talking about like, like however many years ago, 15, 20, however long ago. She had moved to like Oklahoma and she was new in town and didn't know anybody. And she went to see us play and she met all her friends in that town. And like, it really helped her through, and then I started seeing more and more things like that. Because that was like really surprising to me, that all these years later that someone would, take the time to write that. And so once he sent that and a couple more things like that came across my screen, I was like, oh, maybe some people would want to see us, or something. So that's when I was like, kind of just agreed to it, thinking that, how you like sort of agree to stuff, not thinking it's actually going to happen. And that's kind of what I did with John. I was just like, yeah. I guess we'll do it. Not thinking it would actually happen. But then John booked the show, but again, it wasn't even like announced. So I was still kind of not thinking it was going to happen. And then like it got announced. I was like, okay, well now we're actually going to do this, because I had been in touch with the guys, but I hadn't like talked to them for years and years, pretty much since Tokyo Rose ended. Like we had gotten a couple offers like years ago to like play some festival, but we just didn't do it for whatever reason. And since then, and that's got to be at least 10 years ago, that I haven't talked to anybody about that stuff. It was just kind of like not really in my mind. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't in anyone else's mind either, for that amount of time. But for whatever reason, just John caught us at the right time and convinced us to do it. And here we are.
I love that. Sometimes you just need someone to kind of poke the flame, and then you guys get up on the stage and you realize, like, why did we stop doing this? Like, this is so much fun. And
It was funny. We kind of experienced both ends of the spectrum in that weekend. So we did like a weekend, right? And John booked the Jersey show, which is where we're from, and I live outside of Philadelphia now. And we always would play Philly a lot, or like South Jersey. So I suspected it's like, oh, there's going to be a good amount of people that want to see us that aren't going to drive all the way up to like near New York. So let's do a Philly show. So we did. And both of those, I had a feeling were going to do well. And they did. But for whatever reason, like very late in the game after the shows were announced, a promoter in Brooklyn hit up John and asked us to play. We were skeptical because like back then we had never played I mean, to this date, until that one day, we've never played in Brooklyn ever. But they offered a bunch of money or whatever, and we were just like, fuck it, let's do it. We even offered to do it like at another time where, because like the Jersey and Philly show was like Friday and Saturday, the best days or whatever. And then and we had like our friends' bands opening for us and stuff. But like in Brooklyn, we didn't know any of the bands, or it was like really an afterthought. It was like, set up after everything, where we were very hands off about it. We had nothing to do with it basically, other than saying, yeah, we'll play. So getting back to your point where you're like, well, why did we stop doing this or whatever? So that show was really bad, like attendance and everything, right? And whatever. We appreciate the offer and interest of like the promoter and everything, but we didn't really have a hand in and we played with some really cool bands that we hopefully will see again at some point, but it just wasn't like something that we were involved in. Like the other two shows, we were very involved in it, and so, and they were great, but to your question, like we kind of felt that way about the two shows of like, oh, why did we ever stop doing this? This is great. But then like we also were like, oh, this is why we stopped doing this, because we like had that other like not so great experience the next night.
yeah, it kind of gave you kind of deja vu of probably when you guys are first starting out, grinding it out and playing those like stinker of shows. And every band's got to do it, right? Like there's not always going to be a packed room, especially in markets that aren't your own. So to now as an adult experience it, at least like you guys probably have normal jobs where you're like, yeah, you know what, I could still go get food tonight and put gas in, gas in the tank, and we'll still get home. But like when you were 20 or 19 doing this, it hurt a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, and that is true. That is exactly the situation now. It honestly wasn't ever like a thing for us that we were worried about, like, oh boy, are we going to make it home? Or are we going to, you know, be all right? We knew we were going to be all right, but when you put so much time in and you work hard and you go out and you do those kind of shows, which everyone does, at some point or another. Yeah, it's just like disheartening. Like, why am I in the middle of the country right now, like away from friends and family, like, and there's like 10 people here that don't give a shit. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of thing. Sure, we experienced that a lot, back then, as did a lot of bands, I'm sure. So we're not unique in that way by any means, but yes, we definitely had that back then, and we did have that, not that bad, on the Brooklyn show. And so that reminded us, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. It's not all, amazing or whatever.
Yeah, I think Brooklyn's a
And I feel
tough
like
market
Brooklyn
too.
is
Yeah.
such a hard, yeah, Brooklyn's a tough market.
I mean, Brooklyn has changed in the last however many years we haven't been a band. It wasn't like a spot where bands were going to back then. We would go to Long Island and we would play in like the city, Manhattan and stuff, but we'd never played in Brooklyn. So now it's sort of a spot where bands go, I guess.
What was the room that you played in Brooklyn?
It's called the Meadows.
I'm too
It's like
familiar
this
with that
weird,
one.
it's like, it's part of that place called the Brooklyn Monarch.
Okay.
You ever heard of
Yeah.
that?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
They have like a bunch of different rooms and stuff. So we
I
played this.
remember the one that was open recently was the Knitting Factory, and that was the one that closed.
Well, we used to play that back in the day when it was in New York City.
Yeah,
That was our spot where we played when we went to New York. Because that was another venue that had like multiple stages and stuff. They had one in New York. We always played, and we also played at the one in Los Angeles all the time.
nice.
Same thing, like same setup, like multiple stages, multiple rooms. It was cool. So depending on the type of tour we were on, we'd play the middle stage.
Now, I guess to fast forward to this summer, you are planning to do a West Coast run, and Watashi Wa is on a few of the dates, which is also one of those like throwback early 2000s bands. I remember seeing them with Gatsby's American Dream in like 2004. See that name come up too. It's not like, I think that's what's beautiful about this genre of music, right? Because in the early 2000s, there were so many bands, right? And like Tom and I and Justin, we always were checking out, like, what bands were on labels and like where were they from and like who was opening for tours. Like that's how we discovered bands. And 20 years go by, some of those bands that we did listen to, it just kind of leaves your memory for a little bit. But then seeing that tour flyer, I was like, holy crap. And I went back and listened to Watashi Wa, and I was like, yeah, these guys did rip. Like that was so cool to see that name just even on your flyer.
Yeah. Yeah. That was intentional for sure. Like we realized that we're like obviously all older now and we all come from the same era. So just when building a show, Bill, we wanted to do it with other like-minded bands from that same time frame that had a similar fan base. Watashi was one of them. We had played with them. I don't know if it was their first tour, but it was very early on of our band, and we played a bunch of shows. They I don't know how much backstory you know of Tokyo Rose, but like our label, like an offshoot of this other label called Militia Group that had a lot of bands that later went on to be pretty big or whatever. So when they all were first starting and they were starting to do these smaller tours and they came to like New Jersey, New York or whatever, the label would hit us up to be like, hey, like as I'm sure they did in many other places with other bands, our situation as well, that we were starting out trying to get signed and everything. And so that's how we met with Tashi, because they came with a band from Militia called Copeland on their first run, and it was like a smaller tour, obviously, like attendance wise. But yeah, like Watashi was just starting out with their first album, Tooth and Nail. So we had met them, and that's the same thing, like how we had met The Beautiful Mistake, you know. Uh, and then after we put out our first album, we did a tour with that band Audio Karate. So, and they're all West Coast bands. We were like, oh, let's just everybody team up and we'll do it. So luckily they were all down to do it.
Nice. And how many total dates are you guys doing out there?
Just four. Arizona, LA, San Diego, and Anaheim.
Okay.
Nice.
Justin likes to call like when bands in their 40s like do these like little weekend runs and like week runs. It's just PTO with the boys.
Yeah.
Always PTO with the boys.
Yeah. I mean, we can't really tour, obviously. It's like, are you guys married with kids and jobs and all
Yep.
that? As are we, and so it's like I would, even if I could, really wouldn't want to leave my family and my kids and all that for an extended period of time. Not to mention, like, you know, end of this all. It's not like we're getting rich or anything doing these shows, like, so that's not why we're doing it. We don't care, honestly. But yeah, we could never do anything more than what we're doing pretty much.
And is John helping you guys book those shows out west, or did you just kind of start reaching out to promoters and doing it yourself?
Yeah, John helped for sure.
Okay.
He has a huge network.
Yeah, he's sort of taken over the reins as far as like the business part of the band, because we're sort of like out of touch with all that stuff right now.
He's the guy to do it, man. Like I remember he usually calls me every few months and we'll have like an hour and a half conversation about like what's going on, some of the new bands that are up and coming, like what they're doing with karaoke. And he's always just like wide array of information just to be able to chat with. So you have like the perfect guy in your corner.
Yeah, he seems to know a lot of promoters and bands and stuff, and he actually hooked us up with somebody that's gonna release uh our album of ours on vinyl and stuff. So that's not announced yet, but it will be soon. And so yeah, he's been a huge help on top of being the catalyst to even, you know, get us to even play a show, let alone do all. Yeah.
So like logistically, I know you guys haven't prior to this year, you guys haven't really played too many shows together, but some tour nerds that listen to this podcast love when I ask this question. But what are the logistics of like, are you guys going full digital to fly over to California? Or are you guys like gear sharing with some of the other bands over there?
Um, to fly over we're just using our friend. We're all friends. We've
Yeah,
been 20 years, so we're just going to use the gear. We're gonna. Luckily, a friend of Ryan, I think a friend of his, someone he knows in church or whatever, has a place for us to stay out there that I guess like an Airbnb type thing that they rent out. So they're renting.
nice.
That's like centrally located in California, so we'll be staying there. And then my family lives in Arizona, so we'll be staying with my sister when we're in Arizona, and we'll just rent a car and or like a van or whatever and drive from spot to spot, and then we'll just play with the other band's gear using their stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, we can't afford to ship all that stuff out. That'd be crazy.
No, it's funny because like some bands now, like I'm even in that boat where I just have a pedal board. I literally went like this off camera, but I just have a pedal board that it's a whole digital rig that I just take with me anywhere and I can just throw it on as a check bag.
Yeah,
I don't even have to worry about it anymore.
Ryan, I think, has that. Our singer,
Nice.
he doesn't use an amp anymore. He just has this. It's like a box on his pedal. I don't know about that. I'm not like a gearhead person, but um, I think he has what you're talking about. He doesn't
Yeah, it
on the shows that we've done. He didn't use like an amp.
perfect. That's like the best thing. So you don't have to like carry around a 412 or anything else. It's so easy.
I mean, I still have all the old school stuff, so I any of that stuff, but and neither does our other guitarist. But
Are
Ryan,
you still running with like an Ampeg 810 or did you kind of like go down a little bit?
610 now,
610, okay.
which is
So you
not
got
much.
two speakers out.
It's still really heavy.
You went from a full size fridge to a half size fridge.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, my amp, the actual amp is a lot less now. Now I have SVT Pro 3, I think it's called.
Yeah,
Back then I had SVT Classic, which
the
is
big
like,
old tube head.
it's so heavy. Yeah. So the head is
Hopefully you guys don't have any stairs to you have to worry about.
not so far.
There was this place on Long Island in Rockville Center. I think it was called
Oh,
Vibe Lounge,
I know.
and the stairs
Like
that
you had to go downstairs.
my God, it was so
The
bad.
Vibe
Yep.
Lounge. I remember we played there.
It was a cool
It was a
spot.
cool
At
spot.
that
It was
point,
actually
just throw it
a
down the
really good
stairs.
location too, because it was right at the Rockville Center train station. Like you got off the train
Yeah,
and it was right there.
I remember. Yeah, yeah. That was a cool spot. We had some good shows there.
Amen. So yeah, let's bring it back now a little bit. So early 2000s were just at the peak of alternative and emo music, right? And that's why 20 plus years later, there's this resurgence because all of the kids that were going to shows in those years are now 40 years old or approaching 40, have an income, and they're like, hey, let's get a babysitter and let's like have a night out. And now there's all these 25th anniversary tours and 20th anniversary tours. And you guys were grinding your teeth right there at the peak of this. And Tokyo Rose for me was a household name. I grew up on Long Island, so you mentioned you played Long Island a bunch, and it was always kind of just one of those names that went around. And I had a CD of New American Saint, and I I don't know if I necessarily saw you guys at the downtown, but like I mentioned, it was just one of those names where it almost seemed like you guys were a local band, even though you guys are in Jersey. But let's talk about some of those days of just I guess we could start in Jersey because Jersey had its own scene that created some household names that are now some of the biggest names in emo and alternative music. And I'm sure you guys played like local shows with some of these bands before they blew up. So like, My
Yeah.
Chemical Romance, Senses Fail, Saves the Day, like these were all Jersey bands, and I'm sure that there's Armor for Sleep as well. Just a million bands in that market that went on to do like huge things, played Warp Tours and all of that. So what was it like going to shows and playing shows in the Jersey scene in the early 2000s?
It was awesome, dude. I mean, it was like nonstop. Every weekend there was multiple stuff going on. The thing that made Jersey and Long Island really unique, I think, as opposed to other places. Again, this is just my experience. I don't know if there's any factual basis, but this is how I see it. Like Jersey and Long Island, especially, were very unique because, like, like they were like 90% kid run, like meaning like the people that were setting the shows up were the fans, you know what I mean? Like they were reaching out and getting big name bands that were on their way up. They were still accessible to just some random kid, to hit up a booking agent and be like, hey, I want to do this show, we'll do it at this fire hall and there'll be 400 kids there, you know what I mean? And so it wasn't necessarily like that everywhere else when we started touring. So that was like pretty exciting back then, even for a band like us, because it enabled us to get to play with some of these bands that were, really bigger than the fire hall that they were playing at. It was just a matter of time before they sort of took the world by storm, and many of them did. And so we were lucky enough to be there on the ground floor, just, because, whatever, we might be friends with the promoter, or they just might happen to like our band, or whatever, like, um, it was exciting time, for sure. And like you said, we saw a bunch like Saves the Day and like Midtown, and
Early November.
but they were like a little before us, so they were already, pretty
Established.
at that time, like, but yeah, like I mentioned earlier, like Census Fail started, um Armor for Sleep. My Chem we never really crossed paths with, but they were also new. Like I think that maybe they had already um kind of gotten big too, but there were other ones like Hidden in Plain View. I remember uh, the Early November was blowing up. They were like South Jersey, but still they were blowing up. So there were many that we were, and then the Long Island bands, like you said, like Brand New and Take 'Em Back Sunday, were all already big, but they were still on their way up.
Yeah. Like they were
And you
still,
probably did see it down. By the way, we played there a bunch of times.
oh, the downtown is like
He talks about it all the time.
just my
It was a
happy
good place.
place. And it was such a
Yeah, it was
small
a great.
window. It really was. It was only operating for maybe like 6 years at most. And the amount of shows that I saw there, because it was two towns over for me, is just like you mentioned, every weekend.
Yeah, something.
What was that?
Was that where? Was it like in a town called like Farmingville or something like
Farmingdale,
that?
yeah.
Farmingdale.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember.
Also one of those prime locations right by the Farmingdale train station. So I think that's why so many kids were able to go. And some shows were all ages, but I know most, if not all, were at least like 16 plus. So, when I was in high school, I was able to go to all these shows and it was just unreal. Like I found a show flyer from the downtown that just was for the month of November, and it was like November 2004, and it was like the starting line, something corporate, like different shows, like not even all on the same show. And I was
Yeah.
like, yep, I was at that one. I was at that one. I was at that one. And it was just like all of these bands that are now playing When We Were Young festival.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Do you remember a band? You might not have ever even heard them. I don't know, but they were from Long Island. They were called the Strider.
No.
You ever hear them?
I wish Tom was here because Tom would be like
He would
One
probably know them.
thousand
He's like,
percent.
I got their EP outside on the sidewalk. It was raining.
We were friends with them and really looked up to them and were heavily influenced by them. And they were a Long Island band around that time. I just figured I'd ask.
Well,
They were an Equal Vision band too, I think.
They were, yes.
okay, so I kind of already know what they sound like. I feel like labels kind of had their own sounds too at that time, and Equal Vision definitely had its sound. So I can definitely hear like a little
Well,
proggy and
that's the funny thing is like, um, it's like crazy like to say this aloud, but like we sort of like we really liked them a lot, and we were friendly with them and cool with them and stuff. But it was almost not like an equals type thing. Like we sort of like looked up to them. We thought they were like the shit, basically. But they had that sound. The first album was basically like a Saves the Day sound, but that's not really what we were. They did another record called Jungle City Twitch, I think. I'm pretty sure, and that was around the time that we were playing with them. And the singer had left, and so anytime that happens, it's typically not good for the band. But anyways, we just really liked what they were doing. We played a bunch of shows with them like every other weekend, and kind of like tried to like model ourselves a little bit. Like we were definitely influenced by them or whatever, but suffice to say that second album, I don't know, I didn't work for the record company or anything, but it seemed like it bombed, but the second album that we basically were like so impressed by, we were like, oh, this is awesome, we want to be like this. It didn't work out so great, I don't think. But they were a Long Island band. They were tremendous, I thought. And they definitely had their own thing going on. So we always respected them a lot.
It's funny, we have a term. I don't know if we coined it on the podcast, but we just talk about it a lot. Strider is a band's band,
Yes.
where probably not a lot of people really listened to them, but a lot of bands looked up to them and really loved what they were doing. But it didn't like necessarily reflect on kind of like the people who went to a lot of just like normal shows. It's just funny how that happens.
It's completely accurate. And we have a lot of, like, we had a lot of those like situations like where we really thought like, oh, this band is like, they can do no wrong, but like we were getting it for sure, but like the audience, the widespread audience was just kind of whatever. Yeah.
yeah, Long Island was tough with, music that kind of strayed from the real Warped Tour sounding bands, because a band that should have been way bigger from this time was this band As Tall as Lions, right? They are fantastic. One of my favorite
Oh,
bands, but they didn't fit with the Taking Back Sundays and the Brand News. So like they didn't ride that wave. So like they got on Triple Crown Records, which was a little different, where all those other bands were on Victory and like bigger labels at that point. It always seemed like they just didn't necessarily like tap into the local market at first. Later on, after they've been grinding it out, like they were playing huge like New York City Irving Plaza shows and stuff like that. But like early on, I saw them play a few lightly attended downtown shows, and it just seemed like it took a while for Long Island to really embrace them.
yeah, like you said, they weren't doing exactly what the formula of what was going on at the time, but they were so talented. It was just a matter of time before they got their due. I mean, I love that band, but I saw them at a packed show at the Highline Ballroom in New York City. I think it was one of their last shows, and yeah, um, they were just like you said, a band's band, but they just didn't fit into the package of like the scene or anything like that, you know what I mean. So it took them a little longer. It always takes longer for bands like that.
Yeah,
They can't piggyback off the wave of what's going on at the time. They have to make it on their own. And that's what they did.
because they also didn't necessarily fit on like a Warped Tour bill. And I remember
No.
like them having a tent at Warped Tour, but not even playing the Warped Tour. Like it was maybe a Triple Crown Records tent or whatever, but like the whole band was at maybe the 2004 Warped Tour before the self-titled came out, and they were like there promoting their CD and stuff, but then didn't even get to like play, even in one of the smaller stages, which was just so bizarro.
Yeah, I don't know how that works, how all that works. I mean, we were on the Warped Tour. A lot of times, all that is if your manager, or whatever, knows the right person, get you on, basically. So
Yeah.
not really a reflection of As Tall as Lions by any means. It's just the way it works sometimes. But yeah, I agree. They weren't like a Warped Tour type band, you know. They needed to be on like, I mean, you can say this with so many bands, but in my opinion, with them specifically, since we're talking about them, uh, you know, like they're on indie emo label, and they should have been on like a major label that was on alternative rock radio. You know, they were playing with like shows with like the Killers or somebody. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or Coldplay or one of those kind of bands.
Yeah.
I know that's crazy to say, but I mean that's,
No, because the
they would appeal
songwriting's
a lot to
there,
it.
and it clearly is, because
Yeah.
Dan is now a Grammy award-winning songwriter. So, like,
Yeah.
it makes sense. Like, he's been writing these kinds of songs that, exactly like you said, if he could have got ATAL on shows with the Killers when they were first kind of blowing up as well, I feel like that would have been a better fit.
Yeah, but I mean, every band probably has a very similar story. If you were to ask them all these years later, oh, this would have happened, or we would have signed to this label, or done this tour, things would have been different. And a lot of times they probably would be right, but can't go back and change.
Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, one of the bands that you mentioned just in conversation was Taking Back Sunday, and you guys did a tour, in my opinion, at like the peak of Take It Back Sunday, right? So like 2006-ish era, and I would imagine that was probably your craziest tour that you got to play on. Am I right in saying that, or am
What's
I
that?
right in saying that that was probably one of the craziest tours that you guys got to do?
That was the best tour that we ever did. That's the best tour I've ever done, period. Like of any band I've been in, you know, because like Taking Back Sunday are still like idols of ours, you know, like so to be able to go out on tour with them was the best thing ever. We draw a huge influence from them, especially at that time with that album and the one before it, Where You Want to Be, right? And even the first one, Tell All Your Friends, is that what it's
Mm-hmm.
called?
Yeah.
3 of those were awesome. You know, we listened to them nonstop. I've got to see them a bunch of times, you know, to be able to go on that was great. You know, that was great for our band. It was the best tour we've ever been on. Best time of being in the band.
That was like peak Taking Back Sunday
Mm-hmm.
too. That was like Where You Want to Be was out for about a year at that point. They'd landed a song on the Spider-Man 2 soundtrack.
Yeah. It was
They
actually
were just
It was the Louder Now release tour. So Louder.
yeah. I saw the second run of that tour with Angels and Airways. I think that was the tour I saw.
I don't know. Yeah, like the
That
one
was
was like their like underplay tour. It was like the small club tour for them.
yeah.
But it was not small clubs, obviously. It was like for them it's considered small. So like yeah, they probably did do a bigger tour after that, but that was the one where Louder Now, it was called the Louder Now tour.
CDs were still kind of king at the time, right? So people were still buying CDs. So did you guys just like burn through New American Saint, like the amount of copies that you brought with you, and like had to get the label to send you more out?
Yeah, we sold a ton of merch, and CDs and stuff. That was really, like I said, the best tour for many different reasons, but for the merch and the CD sales and stuff, and sort of like getting noticed finally by other like record labels and stuff like that. Like that's when that finally happened for a little bit for us, you know, when we were on that tour, especially when we played the Irving Plaza show in New York City.
Nice.
Bunch of people came out to see us.
And
It
that
was
was
cool.
still the Fred era, right? Of Taking Back Sunday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was the last album he had done, and so that's the reason that we were even on that tour with him, because I was friends with him because we um, had crossed paths with his old band. Do you know his band before that called Breaking Pangea?
I don't know.
Yeah, so okay,
It
so
was great.
or that from Long Island, actually. The drummer's from Long Island. And they were a 3-piece called Breaking Pangea, and we did a bunch of dates with them when we were first starting out. And they were another band that we really respected and thought the world of, but they weren't necessarily so, known by like people that weren't in bands. You know what I mean? Just like it didn't really translate to just your common, person that's going to shows. But we really liked them. And so they had a bunch of like member issues and stuff. Or not I wouldn't say a bunch, but yeah, they had some issues that they resolved, which I'm glad that they did. But for a time they needed fill in bass player. So I filled in for them for some short touring and stuff. And so that's, how I became um, better friends, like close friends with Fred. And we stayed in touch. And he knew that I was doing Tokyo Rose. So when it came time that he had an opportunity to help us out, he did. So we always really appreciate that.
Love that. I love when bands kind of bring the next one up, right? Like when they have an opportunity, they don't just like think, all right, who's going to help us sell more tickets or anything like that. They just are like paying it forward, right? Because that's really what happened, I'm sure, in the New Jersey scene, but also in the Long Island scene, right? Like that's how so many bands ended up making it, right? Because they didn't like gatekeep it. They weren't trying to only be successful. They didn't want to like steal all the success. They wanted to let it trickle down. And sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't see it. So it's nice to hear that Fred sounds like a real one.
He for sure is. They helped us for sure. I mean, quite honestly, they didn't need help selling tickets. No matter who they had as an opener, they were going to be just fine. But they helped us out when they could have, I'm sure, taken another band out or whatever. We really appreciate it. We, like you said, we came up in this same scene as a lot of bands that blew up. And, you know, quite honestly, we did not take, asked to go out on tour with these bands. And so, that made us extra appreciative. The biggest band of all comes and asks you to do the tour. We really, really appreciated it. But yeah, like, to your point, like, you're right. Like a lot of the bands paying it forward, bringing their friends along and stuff. Like we did not really benefit from that as much as you would think. From when coming from the scene that we did, we didn't go on tours with a lot of those bands, and I mean, I'm sure there's reasons for that. Some of them probably our fault, but when it finally did happen, we really were on cloud nine.
Love that. And then you mentioned that you played a few dates of the Warp Tour. Did you do a full Warp Tour ever, or just like a East Coast run, or a few
We
dates?
did East Coast, did West Coast, we did the Texas and Arizona, all through those states. Yeah, it was on a smaller stage in 2004. We did pretty much, we didn't go to Canada. We played most of them. And then after that, we played the West Coast. I don't know why, but we played the West Coast, not the East Coast. Um, we were always like every summer we were on there for a couple days, you know what I mean? But 2004 was the one we were on it for majority of it. And then 2007, I believe, was our last year of touring. And that was when we did the West Coast portion of it.
So
So,
do you have a crazy Warp Tour story, or did you guys keep it kind of mellow?
well, we were not on a bus, so we really couldn't party as much as the other bands. I mean, I remember still to this day, uh, in 2004, the routing is like crazy. So, I mean, it's designed for bands that are on a bus, not in a van. But so we were driving, and I think there was no day off in between. I don't know how good your geography is, but I think we played San Francisco on July 3rd, and then we were driving overnight to play Las Vegas on July 4th because everybody wanted to party in Vegas on July. So we were driving, and I had never we that's not we had been in Las Vegas once before, but um, definitely not familiar with the area.
It's like a 9 hour drive.
And we totally ran out of gas like at like 4 in the morning, like maybe an hour outside of Las Vegas, or maybe a little less or whatever. But there's nothing out there; it's just dead. luckily, I think Ryan's friend from high school or something had moved out there and was living there and was expecting us. So we had to call him. He had to wake his ass up in the middle of the night, drive all the way out, get us, get gas. I mean, it was a huge ordeal. Then we had to finally get to the place. It's like 120 degrees that day. I don't know. It's like really hot. We played a show that day. And there was like a whole bunch of other stuff that happened, but that was probably the most hectic time that we had on Warped Tour.
But you didn't. Was that a Warped Tour date that you played in Vegas, or was that like an off show?
No, it was the Warped Tour. Yeah.
What was the call time for that show?
Oh, I don't know. It was so long ago. But yeah, it was just like any other show. What do you mean call time?
Like, when did you have to be the at the?
Every single day, every Warped Tour, every day you have to be there. Like I don't remember exactly, like super early, you know. But for like the smaller bands, you kind of just like float in and
Sneak
out.
your way in?
Well, as long as you're there, we kind of were like notorious for that. Like always just kind of like showing up. Like, like we were there in time, but we weren't there at the load-in time. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's probably our bad. We shouldn't have done that. But when I had done it, the Warped Tour later on, obviously in another, we were traveling in a bus, so you just fall asleep, you'd wake up and you're there. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
we didn't have that luxury in Tokyo Rose. We just had to make our way there whenever we could, and we tried to get there when we could, and we did. But we weren't always there like when we were supposed to be.
That's got to put such like a toll on your shitty like Sprinter van that you had, right? Like I'm sure it wasn't the best running van, and like doing probably what 5,000 miles in a couple of weeks span, if not more, like to just totally destroy that.
Oh, it did. It did. And then our guitarist's parents let us use their SUV for the part of it, So, which was even more
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but we just,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But yeah, it was crazy. We were sort of out of our depth at that point because we didn't understand like how bands, like how things were done. You know what I mean? Like we kind of just were just going and just doing the best we could at the time with what we knew, basically. That was early, I mean, we had only done 2 or 3 tours by that time. And then we did the Warped Tour, which was way more in depth and strenuous than anything we had ever done before.
That's beautiful though. Like talk about getting lucky or knowing the right people, playing 2 tours and then the third one being Warped Tour is just like unreal.
It sounds more glamorous than it was. Because we were not on like a main stage or anything. We split time. We were part of it. We were on a thing called punkrocksnet.net, and then the other part of it, we were on the smart punk stage. And so both were smaller stages on the side. They were both cool. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was still amazing, but it was a lot of hard work too.
But Kevin notoriously, like when you play your hometown like market, will let bands kind of play either a bigger stage or like a better time slot. Did you get any hometown love when you played like Jersey or New York or Philly?
I remember all 3 shows were good, like for sure. I don't remember if it was because we were on at a specific time or anything. I do remember that we just played the stage we were supposed to play. I remember the Jersey one. Also understand that the order of the bands that play is in no way reflected by like the size of the band or anything like
No.
that. I don't,
Apparently
it's all kind of,
it's due to like whatever band partied the hardest the night before, Kevin would make them play first. And like I've heard it from Kevin say that, like in an interview.
but where I was going with that was in the Jersey one. I remember we played right after, like on our stage, we played the same stage as Early November, and they played
Nice.
right before us. And obviously they had a massive crowd. And so they, if I remember correctly, they were like, everybody stick around for our friends Tokyo Rose or something. So I'm sure that helped, obviously, enough for that show. But all the shows where you think they would be good, they were good. I don't know why though. I don't know if it was because we got some love, extra special treatment, or if it was just the way it was.
Touche. So to kind of just my last question, since I spent a lot of time listening to New American Saint to just get some nostalgic vibes, my question's about like the track listing and the order of the songs. So did you guys intentionally have like a pop punk heater followed by like a slower ballad cut type of song, then a pop punk heater? Felt very like one pop punk song, one slow song, one pop punk song, one slow song. Like, was there any reasoning for that, or like the label
Yeah.
intentionally like had you guys do that? What was the thought process and planning process for that?
Well, I can't really. I'm not the most educated on that question to answer it completely, but I can tell you what I do know. And it's like just from being the band and the vibe we were going for at the time, like we were a pop punk band, I guess. You know, everybody viewed us as that. You know, we did not view ourselves as that, though, unfortunately. You know, so we were trying to do something different. But no matter what we did, or no matter what we do, quite honestly, people always just consider, well, you know, classify it as that. And so on the next record, we made a more conscious effort to just like lean into it and just like say, this is what we are, you know, and so this is what we're going to do. During New American Saint, we were definitely trying to get away from it. And so we were listening to a bunch of different stuff and influence, and we even chose the producer based on that. You know, that record was done by the producer that did Copeland in that
Nice.
studio. And so that was more of like an indie emo sound or whatever. So we were trying to go for that. And he had, the producer also had a big influence in, you know, all the songs, the recording, the production, and the track listing and stuff, and how the things flowed from. And like, if you listen to the whole album, a couple of them have like little segues in between and stuff, where it goes from one song to another. All that's intentional. So it was sequencing on New American Saint, I would say, was very deliberate for sure. And for that reason, it was kind of, we were trying to do something a little different to break away from that, um, you know, classification that we were just a pop punk band or whatever. Whether or not it was, you know, worked, I don't know, probably not. You know, I think people just still thought of it as that, but that's at least what we were trying to do with that. So yeah, it was deliberate with those.
Yeah, and I think both kind of can live on an album at the same time, and you guys do it nicely. It definitely, when Ryan goes to like his faster, higher vocals, is when he shines though. Like when he does the, like, not necessarily like screaming, but kind of more of the pop punk like edgy parts, I can't help but hearing like Cartel in his vocals and Justin from Motion City Soundtrack, and it's just like at that time those are two of the like pinnacle vocalists, and to be mentioned in that caliber, it just like goes to show how killer that record was, and just, you know, how awesome Tokyo Rose is. So kudos to you guys, and you know, bringing that sound out.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that to hear, super happy to hear you say that it had an impact like that, that people would even mention us in the same sentence as those groups, and that you kind of got the vibes that you did from the album back then, and that you care enough to listen to it now. You know, we really do appreciate that.
Amen. So Justin, I know we had a very extensive list of questions. I want to make sure that you got any of yours in there if you wanted to.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask, was the producer that you went to for that album, that was you said Copeland, so I'm assuming it was Matt Goldman?
You assume right. Yep.
He produced some of my favorite albums.
Ours
What
too.
was it like? What was it like just working with him? Because he's done The Chariot, he's done, in my opinion, one of the best As Cities Burns albums, and I know a lot of people will be like, no, actually, the stuff Cody did after was way better. But I think that the scope of work that Matt Goldman had done was just absolute for that area. What was it like just being in that atmosphere and working with someone like that?
It was great. I mean, we moved down to Atlanta. Stayed there for a little over a month doing the album with him. Like you said, he did Copeland. He did a lot of, not even that he did like softer music. He did a lot of heavy stuff too with like
Chariot.
that. But it was just like a different vibe. It was like not the drive-through thing. He did not have that going on. Like um his sounds and tones and gear and everything was more of like a old school, like more vintage indie sound. So that's why we went there, because we were trying to sort of differentiate from that whole vibe, I guess you could say. Because
Yeah.
I mean, the first album we did was that, that was in New Jersey with a great producer that we think very highly of, that did a lot of those drive-through bands and stuff. And honestly, that's what we wanted to do when we first started, because that's what every band in New Jersey wanted to do when they first started, that we all looked up to Midtown and stuff, and we're like, they're the best, we want to be like that. And so that's what we did. And we went to Chris Badami at Portrait Studios for the first album. He's done a bunch of drive-through stuff and some other really good stuff as well. But then we sort of switched gears for the second one and went to Matt. He was very different. Like I said, he worked on our playing a lot and was very hands-on with arranging. Some of the stuff he didn't necessarily agree with that we wanted to do, and he still let us do it, but highly advised against it. Some of the times we did listen to him and take it as his advice. We probably should have done more of that, but yeah, like he had a whole slew of musicians that came and helped out. We used a bunch of different instruments that we had never done. There's lap steel, guitar on there, organ, percussion, upright bass, all stuff that we've never done before that you're not going to hear on most albums of like our genre and stuff. And that was,
Yeah.
I mean, that was pretty much all him, you know. So it was definitely a different experience, and it made us grow as a band, and made us think about like playing tighter and being better at our instruments, and then also just like being more deliberate in everything that we did with our music. So a lot of that has to do with Matt. We were lucky to go and work with him for that month.
Well, I must say,
That's
like,
awesome.
going back and listening 20 years later, the album still sounds like very polished and sounds like just well done. Where, like, you go back and listen to some of the other stuff from the early 2000s, and it's just like, like, there's kind of like humming noises in the background. It just doesn't sound crisp. And I must say, like, that recording sounds still like pristine all these years later.
Yeah, that's all Matt. He does a great job. It's not us.
It's you guys. I mean, honestly, I joke around with my friends who are producers, and I'm like, 80% of how a record sounds comes to like how well you sit there and track. And they're like, yeah, but it also, that 20% comes from us nailing you guys to get the perfect take each time. I go, that's true.
Yeah, that is
But
true.
it's crazy, like looking back at like Matt's discography and just seeing the breadth of artists that you guys were influenced by, and even a lot of bands that you probably influenced as well, just coming after it. And I just like looking through, I was like, let me just see. I just want to make sure it was Matt Goldman. But I was like looking through and I'm like, he did a majority of like my favorite Under Oath albums, my favorite Copeland albums, my favorite Anne Berlin albums. Like it's just crazy looking through that. And it goes to show working with a producer at that caliber really makes the music almost immortal, to Mikey's point. Like it transverses the age, if that's like what kind of like what we're looking for. But I'm so glad that you guys had that opportunity to do that, because that's like that was the big difference between like the sound of your like of your three albums. That one stood out the most.
Yeah, I agree. We were lucky, and like in my opinion, that was our best work that we've ever done. It sold the most. We had the most success touring on that one. Um, I remember, you know, people really having kind words to say about it. People, that were sort of big shots, that we looked up to, certain bands and everything, had kind words to say about it. So yeah, a lot of that, well, it was us obviously, but a lot of that had to do with Matt as well. He helped us out a lot.
Amen. Well, I guess I'll fire my last question. It just came to me as we're talking all of this recording and music with these reunion shows and this, West Coast run that you got coming up. Has a conversation ever came up of like getting in the studio and maybe recording some new tunes as Tokyo Rose?
Yes. We actually already started.
Okay, nice.
We're recording with, well, that's a funny thing. Like, I get the feeling like people want to throw their name out there to record us and stuff these days. So I actually just talked to a producer today that's in a very notable band and stuff. So we're not like really recording for a release per se. We just have like a song, because it's a lot harder. Obviously, these days we don't have the time to really put in to write and practice and all that stuff like we used to. After Tokyo Rose ended, Ryan wrote a bunch of songs. I think like, I don't know, like he got involved in his church and stuff. And I think he was like writing some music for that or something. So those songs kind of like just sat there on the back burner for years. And so he demoed some of them and we were like, oh, this could be a cool thing if we sort of reworked it a bit and made it more like our style and everything. And so we did that with one song and we're happy with the way it came out. So we just they started recording drums and guitars for that with actually my buddy Fred from Taking Back Sunday. He's a producer now too. So he has a studio. So we were starting to do stuff with him.
He is such a prolific singer-songwriter. He's like honestly like he's probably one of on my Mount Rushmore of guitarists that's really influenced like my playing ability. And just the way that he thinks about music, I've just kind of like heard like a lot of conversations that he's had, and I follow his web series on YouTube too. It's just the way he thinks about music is completely different, and I love how he approaches different things. So I'm really excited to see like what you guys come out with this album, especially with Fred working on it.
Yeah, that's why we did go with him because we want like we've been out of the game for a while, so we were originally going to record it with my friend and he does a great job and everything and he gets great tones and everything, but I did want to have like an outside influence that was going to be vocal that everyone was going to listen to when it came to like songwriting or changing stuff or suggesting stuff, and so I just felt like if Fred is the type of guy, like if he gives you an opinion, you at least take it under consideration based on his previous body of work and his what he's currently doing, where it's like, okay, this guy knows his shit. Like we're gonna at least take this seriously what he says. And he's also like his history with the band, knowing us forever. I felt like he was going to feel comfortable and also passionate about giving us the input that's necessary to make it the best that it could be. So that's why I ultimately made that decision. So that's why we're working with him right now.
Nice.
I'm so pumped. I can't wait. Now, are you prepared to release music in 2025? Are you going to be doing TikTok dances and playing in your bathroom and all this weird stuff that you have to do now?
Absolutely not. I can guarantee you that you'll never see that from us. I know that that's the way that you get popular now, I guess, but I guess we're just not going to be popular because, yeah, that's a negative there. But we will try and make the best music that we can and spread it out the way as effectively as we can, given the means that we are willing to do it. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, at this point, you're
We're
just
not entertaining
releasing music.
or content or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think you kind of come to terms with releasing music as you just mature and you start to release music that you want to create and that you want to get out there versus like what's gonna sell the most, streams or whatever it is nowadays. So like I think that's the luxury of playing music still when you've been in the game for so long and you can kind of just say screw it, we're just gonna do this because we want to do it.
That's exactly right. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd be lying like if I said like of course we want 100,000 people to listen to us on Spotify and everything like that. Of course, we want to play huge shows and have everyone love Tokyo Rose and everything. But, um, if that doesn't happen, that's okay. Like we already had that part of our lives and we went way further than we ever thought with the band. And now we just do it because we enjoy it. We want to play music with our friends and have something to do. Like, what did he say? PTO with the boys.
PTO
PTO with the boys.
That's the perfect way to look at it. Dono from the Swellers said the same thing, like when he does music with No Trigger and stuff and runs with them. And he's just like, yeah, I just have my normal like 9 to 5, suit and tie job. And then I get to be like, hey, can I get a week off? And they just are like, why? Oh, I'm going to go play a festival in Europe. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
And it's just like the coolest thing where you can still like, because let's be real, like the times of making like enough money to live off of this type of music has probably come and gone, right? So like unless you're like one of those bands that we mentioned that's got, pretty much only playing festivals at this point. So like to have the luxury of having a normal 9 to 5 job stability and then still being like, yeah, I could take 4 days off and play a couple of shows out on the West Coast, and it's not going to like literally destroy you financially. I feel like that's a nice luxury.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Chris, we've been chatting for over an hour. This has been a lot of fun and just bringing me back and bringing us back to those just beautiful years that helped form us into the people that we are. And, I'm 38 years old still talking about this. So it definitely meant a lot to us, and we appreciate your time and super excited that we're getting new Tokyo Rose music, man. I honestly never thought that was going to happen.
Honestly, neither did I. And well, to you guys for giving a shit and also taking the time, keeping this alive, keeping us going all this time. Like, it really gives us motivation to do stuff. And the fact that you guys even, want to talk to me about this and about that time in your life and that time in my life, it was a great time.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful for the experiences I had, and I look forward to making new ones. Hopefully we'll cross paths down the road when we get to travel a little bit more into your area.
I would love that. Chris, it's been real. Take care, my friend. Good luck on those West Coast shows. We'll be following from afar, but I'm sure they're going to be sweet. So thanks again, man.
Thank you, guys. Keep in touch.
Thank you, man.